All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone and welcome to the webcast. My name is Brittany Kabinski. It is now 1 p.m. so we will begin our presentation shortly. Today on Friday, May 24th, we will have our presentation on age-friendly communities, given by Margaret, Neal, Dorian and Jana Lynott. For help during today's webcast, please feel free to type your questions in the chat box found in the webinar toolbar to the right of your screen or call 1-800-263-6317. For content questions, please feel free to type those in the questions box and we will be able to answer those at the end of the presentation during the question and answer session. Here's a list of the sponsoring chapters, divisions, and universities. I would like to thank all of the participating chapters, divisions, and universities for making these webcasts possible, as well as the Private Practice Division for sponsoring today's webcast. As you can see, we have quite a few webcasts scheduled for this summer. To register for these upcoming webcasts, please visit www.utah.apa.org/webcasts and register for your webcast of choice. And you can also follow us on Twitter at Planning Webcast or like us on Facebook, Planning Webcast Series, to receive up-to-date information on the Planning Webcast Series sponsored by chapters, divisions, and universities. To log your CM credits for attending today's webcast, please go to www.planning.org/CM. Select today's date, which is Friday, May 24th, and then select today's webcast, which is Age-Friendly Communities. This webcast is available for 1.5 CM credits. We are also recording today's webcast and it will be available on our YouTube channel later today. Just search Planning Webcast on YouTube. A PDF of the PowerPoint will be made available upon request. And at this time, I would like to introduce Ramona Mulhay, who will introduce our speakers for today, Margaret Neal, Dorian and Jana Lynott.
Good morning, everybody, and good afternoon for those on the East Coast. This is Ramona Mulhay, and I'm the past chair for the Private Practice Division. And today's session on age-friendly communities is really addressing an issue, a problem, a phenomenon that we all know is occurring now. I think the Pew Research says that every day 10,000 baby boomers reach the age of 65. So American Planning Association, through their Divisions Council, has created On the Radar, which looks at some of the emergent issues for planners. And today's is on the aging of baby boomers and aging tsunami. We do have a Divisions Council initiative called Aging and Livable Communities, and you can find it on the APA webpage at Resources on the Radar. Statistics show us that by 2030, more than 70 million Americans, which is twice the number in 2000, will be 65 and older, representing nearly 20% of the total U.S. population. At that time, older adults will comprise nearly 1 in 5 Americans. We know that tremendous advances in health care, economic security, well, maybe not totally economic security with the fiscal situation we have now, and the delivery of supportive services have really done a tremendous job in regards to prolonging life and the experience of aging. We want to live longer, we live healthier lives, and some of us want to work longer. As the older population grows, we are finding that we people want to live in place. We want to age in place. We want communities that we can live for a lifetime. Aging in place is really the ability to live in one's own home and community safely, independently, comfortably, regardless of age, income, or ability level. As the older population grows, the degree that we are able to live in place or age in place becomes challenging. So for those of us in communities in which we are looking at an aging population, here are some of the resources that you can use to get a better sense as to what that demographic is all about. The Profile of Older Americans 2012, Key Indicators of Well-Being, Checklists of Essential Features of Age-Friendly Cities, Aging in Place, a State Survey of Livability Policies and Practices. Today's session is really going to talk about How can we create age-friendly communities, age-friendly cities? And these publications on this page, these resources, are really some of the basis of what you'll be hearing today. Let me introduce today's speakers. Our first speaker will be Margaret Neal, and Margaret is the director of the Institute on Aging, where she oversees the Age-Friendly Portland Project and the Aging Matters Locally and Globally initiative. She does research. Among her topics of research are the characteristics and creation of age-friendly cities and communities, transportation options for older adults, and strategies for promoting healthy aging. Our next speaker is going to be Dorian Block. Dorian is the project manager of the Age-Friendly New York City initiative. Age-Friendly New York City aims to engage all public and private sectors of the city to become more inclusive of older adults. The initiative is really staffed by the New York Academy of Medicine in partnership with the Mayor's Office and the New York City Council. In her role, Dorian has led the creation of neighborhood-level aging improvement districts, which is really a phenomenal program. And she's worked with city agencies to integrate the concept into their agenda, and she advises cities all around the world how to launch their own age-friendly initiatives. Our last speaker is Jana, Lynott. She is a Senior Strategic Policy Advisor on the Livable Communities team in AARP's Public Policy Institute. There she focuses on a broad array of planning and policy issues, including human services transportation coordination, complete streets, and the travel patterns of older adults. Today she will talk a little bit from her recent publication, Weaving It Together, a tapestry of transportation funding for older adults. Margaret and Dorian will talk about the age-friendly communities. So all three speakers will give you an idea how planners the tools that planners have and programs in terms of on the ground addressing the issue of aging. And now let me turn to our first speaker, Margaret Neal. Welcome, Margaret.
Hello, I'm very happy to be here. I'm going to share my screen here. All right, great. What I want to do is talk with you about the World Health Organization Age-Friendly Cities Project as it was implemented here in Portland, Oregon, and what has happened since that time. First, just a few more demographics, focusing more on global aging issues. Our world is aging. In 2006, 11% of the global population was age 60 and over, and yet by 2050, it will be 22%. And at that time, there will be more older people than children age 0 to 14 for the first time in history. Also, another trend that's important to take account of is that more of the world's population is living in urban areas, whereas in 2007, about 49% lived in urban areas. By 2030, the number jumps to 60%. And most of that growth is occurring in cities of less than 5 million and also in developing regions. The World Health Organization in 2002 created a model which they called their active aging model. And essentially what that model portrays is the fact that we have a number of factors that determine how well we age, and not just how well we're doing at any given time, but those factors determine our cumulative well-being over our life course, and they account for differences in life expectancy and health status and well-being. And they include social determinants, economic determinants, health and social services, behavioral determinants, personal determinants, and the physical environment, and all of that within the context of our gender and our culture. So before we get any further, let me define what the World Health Organization uses as its definition of an age-friendly city. It's a city that adapts its structures and services to be accessible to and inclusive of older people with varying needs and capacities. It's a city that emphasizes enablement rather than disablement, and it's friendly for people of all ages, not just age-friendly. So how does planning come? Well, I think a quote that's particularly useful is one by Jane Jacobs, who wrote, "Cities have the capability of providing something for everybody only because and only when they are created by everyone." That quote is important because the World Health Organization's model for an age-friendly city insists on the involvement of older adults in creating an age-friendly city. And then the definition by the American Planning Association, its own definition of what planning is an important indicator of why planning fits in. Planning is a dynamic profession that works to improve the welfare of people and their communities by creating more convenient, equitable, helpful, efficient, and attractive places for present and future generations. So the objectives of the World Health Organization Age-Friendly Cities Project were essentially to create concrete indicators of what an age-friendly city would be and to produce a practical guide so that advocacy efforts, community planning, policy efforts could all be instituted to create more age-friendly urban communities. For the cities that participated in the study, the goal was to increase awareness of local needs and gaps and identify good ideas for improvement, again, in order to stimulate development of a more age-friendly urban setting.
Margaret, could
Yes.
you speak a little closer to the microphone? Some of the attendees are having a little difficulty hearing.
Okay, is that better?
That's better. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I apologize. The project sites that were part of the WHO study were recruited through informal networks of the WHO project leaders, connections that they had to municipal or state governments, and through promoting the project at professional conferences. In the end, focus groups were conducted in 33 cities in 22 countries, and the participating cities were diverse, ranging from cities in 19 developing and 14 industrialized countries, and there were megacities involved as well as smaller communities and neighborhoods. This is a map that shows where all of the cities participating in the original Age-Friendly Cities project were located. And you can see there's quite an array of representation, all the different continents. So throughout the world was represented. Portland was one of the cities that participated. The Portland region is viewed by some as a poster child for regional planning growth, management, and other innovative urban planning practices and policies. Yet, planning for older adults had received very little attention. We at the Institute on Aging were actually approached by the World Health Organization to conduct this study, in part because of work that we had done with an arm of the WHO, the Pan American Health Organization. And the Institute on Aging is one of the oldest aging research centers in the U.S., created in 1969. We are located in an urban serving university, Portland State University, with a motto of "Let knowledge serve the city." And our mission is to enhance understanding of aging and facilitate opportunities for elders, families, and communities to thrive. So we viewed, although there was no funding associated with conducting this research, we viewed this as a very important opportunity to be engaged in and contribute to making Portland an even better place for people of all ages and abilities. We did have a history of doing some work in this area. We created what I think may be the first planning document related to an aging society, at least in the U.S. We wrote a report that was published by the APA in 1994 called Planning for an Aging Society. And then we had also been requested by our regional government, Metro, to look at age-related shifts in housing and transportation demand in order to help Metro begin its planning process for our aging region. The research design was created by the WHO through its Vancouver protocol. As I mentioned, focus groups were conducted, and everyone who participated in these focus groups, which included older adult groups, informal caregiver groups, and providers of service, including professional government staff, business people and merchants, and staff of voluntary organizations. Each group of people was asked to identify positive and negative features of the city and suggestions for improvement in 8 features of urban life, which were built upon the WHO Active Aging Framework. And this is a diagram that demonstrates those 8 domains, which basically fall into 2 categories: the built environment, which includes outdoor spaces and buildings, transportation and housing, and then the social environment, which includes community support and health services, communication and information, civic participation and employment, respect and social inclusion, and social participation. We created a local project advisory council from people here at the university, our county, our local county, AARP Oregon, Elders in Action, another advisory group, a senior housing provider, a community college, and of course a senior representative and advocate. Initially, what we were engaged in following the research, which I'm not able to talk with you about today, the actual research findings, but I will give you a link so that you can see our summary report as well as our full report in case you're interested. So after we conducted that research, the current mayor, Mayor Tom Cotter, had initiated a Vision PDX effort. And this was essentially to create a vision for the city for the next 20 plus years. And so using the findings from our study, we made comments to the Vision PDX effort, and those were incorporated in the final report for that effort. We also joined a Healthy Aging work group that had been created here in the city. Then we had a new mayor elected, that was Mayor Sam Adams, and he initiated his own visioning effort called the Portland Plan, which was overseen by the city's Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. And the Portland Plan was intended to be a 3-year action plan that was preparatory to revising our comprehensive plan, which is a 25-year strategic plan. The Portland Plan was supposed to be completed in spring of 2011, and it was. And its goal was to make Portland a more thriving and sustainable city for all Portland residents. The mayor did create an advisory group for overseeing that effort and invited us to serve on that advisory group. And essentially our role was to ensure that attention was given to the needs, the strengths of older people, and people with disabilities. Basically what it meant was attending a lot of meetings, countless meetings it seems, and continually raising our hand and saying, what about older adults? What about people with disabilities? So in 2010, the World Health Organization created its global network of age-friendly cities. They did that because there was a lot of interest in this concept of age-friendly cities, and there were communities and cities throughout the world who were interested in having an opportunity to network with one another, share experiences, learn from one another. So this network was created with this cycle, a 5-year cycle. So you would join the network, and in order to join the network, you needed to have a plan that involved older people in conducting a baseline assessment of age friendliness. You needed to develop an action plan and identify indicators of success. Then you needed to implement your action plan and monitor your indicators. And then based on that monitoring, revise your actions, identify new ones, and the cycle then would repeat. The WHO invited applications from cities to join the network, and we approached Portland's mayor, Sam Adams. We pointed out the synergies with the Portland Plan, including the consistent timelines. It was all really quite convenient. We offered to prepare an application to the network. We did. We obtained a letter of support from the mayor, and our application was accepted by WHO, and we were one of 9 initial cities to be accepted into the global network. The picture on the right here is a photograph that was taken when we presented the formal official acceptance into the WHO Global Network to the City Council. And since that time, we have participated in the first International Conference on Age-Friendly Cities in Dublin, Ireland. That was in fall of 2011. In this fall of 2013 is the second international conference. It's being held in Quebec City, and you can find information about that on the web if you just type in International Conference on Age-Friendly Cities. In the fall of 2011, we augmented our advisory council. We expanded it for the purpose of advising on the Portland Plan, the comprehensive plan, and developing our own action plan. And this is a list of the representatives on that advisory council. So we have the university, we have our advocacy organizations, we have, of course, the City of Portland Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, but I will point out that they were not on our initial advisory group, and that was clearly an oversight. Multnomah County Aging and Disability Service, we have the offices of the mayor and the city council commissioners represented, and a number of other groups. So the goal of the Portland Plan, as I mentioned, was to make Portland a more thriving and sustainable place for all residents. And this is just a picture of the draft of that plan. And the plan was released in March 2012. And the plan came out and there was nothing in it about overdose. Nothing. And we couldn't believe it. And so after some initial frustration, we realized that really our only recourse was to write comments in response to the plan. So we did. We wrote very extensive comments, and as did other aging and disability groups who were part of our advisory council. And then the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability requested a meeting with us and realized, they said that somehow it had just slipped through the cracks, this need to focus on Portland as a place for all generations. The Planning Commission had also requested that we present our work to them, and the end result was that the Portland Plan now, in fact, does specifically address how Portland can become a more age-friendly city, and it does it in this page here called Portland as a Place for All Generations. And it outlines specific action items, and those include developing an age-friendly city action plan, which we're still in the process of doing, but with all of our partners. Expanding the availability of accessible housing, concentrating on the creation of age-friendly accessible community hubs, fostering safe and accessible civic corridors, increasing access to and services within medical institutions. And I would add here that there is increasing attention to, rather than creating ever larger hospitals and medical complexes, that attention be paid to neighborhood clinics. And I think that's a direction that we're hopefully going to be moving in the Portland area. Another action step was to create intergenerational mentoring networks, and finally to bolster the framework for equity, which in this new Office of Equity that was created, aging and disability has a place as a focus area of that office. So now the city's updating its comprehensive plan, and that plan covers goals and policies related to land use and physical environment, so not so much on the social side of it. In the creation of that plan, 10 policy expert groups were formed, and we are serving on the neighborhood centers expert group. Just to give you a sense for a few of the things that we've been involved in to create a more age-friendly city, specifically, our approach, let me just say that our approach generally has been to create an age-friendly city working through existing planning mechanisms. So that's why we became so involved in the Portland Plan and now in the comprehensive plan, because it's our belief that that is a way to most sustainably and assuredly create a city that is friendly for people of all ages and abilities. And I have to say that as a researcher, I never would have imagined the advocacy role that I've played in this effort, but it's been very rewarding working very closely with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability and other city bureaus toward this. And But we don't have a lot of very glitzy projects to show as a result, but I'll show you a few. So the Office of Equity and Human Rights, I said, was created, and aging and disability is now a part of that. In collaboration with the Commissioner of the Office of Equity and Human Rights, City Council chambers were improved to provide better access to people of all ages and abilities. There were problems with doors being able to be opened by people in using wheelchairs. There were pathway obstructions. There wasn't the availability of companion seating, and those things have now been remedied. There have been a number of infrastructure improvements. The Portland Bureau of Planning worked with aging and disability advocates to better serve pedestrian, cyclists, and transit users. The previous design, or the initial design, was really considered dangerous for a mix of those users, and it really didn't have clear, separated uses. So the before picture is the one on the bottom, and the after is the one on the top. There were also some transit improvements were made. This top photograph shows the ramp that extends from the Portland streetcar down to the street level, and it's not a huge elevation, but a ramp is needed, and that ramp had a lip on it, and it turned out that that was essentially a federally mandated design, but through aging and disability advocates, an amendment with the Federal Transit Administration was made so that that lip would be eliminated, because it was really, wheelchairs and were hanging up on them. People with walkers were tripping over them. They actually turned out to be really very dangerous. So those lips have now been eliminated from the streetcar. So we've had a number of successes. I talked about one, at least initial failure, which was when the Portland Times came out and didn't talk about it themselves. But I just wanted to highlight a few of the barriers to creating an age-friendly city, just so that we can all be aware of those and then begin to strategize on how we can overcome them. So there are multiple jurisdictions that provide different services, so at least here in our region. So the city is in charge of infrastructure and parking and has its planning division. The county oversees social services and aging services, including a 24/7 helpline, which is staffed by live people and which people view as extremely age-friendly. And then our region, transportation is overseen at the regional level, and also there are long-term planning efforts that go on there, and that's through Metro. Here, as in, I think, probably most other cities in the U.S., we have a severe lack of government resources for maintenance, for development, and redevelopment. Citizen participation is both a plus and a minus. In our case here in Portland, there was pushback when the new mayor, Sam Adams, created his Portland plan, and people had just finished participating in the former mayor's visioning effort, Vision PDX, and it just seemed like such a waste to so many people. And then there was concern about, or there has been from the citizens, about how to ensure appropriate action will be taken when participation is requested, and that's, of course, not a new problem. You've heard me name two mayors. We now have a third one. Charlie Gales is our third mayor. And those transitions in government leadership can be really very challenging. Enough said, I guess, about that. And then there are competing agendas of stakeholders. So elected officials have a set of agenda. Researchers have their own agenda. Private sector. And planning for older adults can really vary as a priority across all of the different needs of a citizenry for education, economic development, homelessness. Bike friendliness is a large issue here in Portland. And planning for older adults needs to take place in that context. And then finally, our university government community partnership is evolving. The traditional role of the university is to do research and to some extent provide expert advice. We've now stepped into the realm of advocacy. Partnerships are crucial as advisors and advocates But the bottom line is that the government has to implement whatever actions are developed, and so that is a potential a barrier, especially when governments are short on funds. But we also know that there are continuing infrastructure improvements, and if we can just take into account age friendliness as we're needing to make those improvements anyway, then that is one way to slowly but surely increase age friendliness of a community. And additional translational research is needed, but funding is required, and it's like government resources in short supply. So our role at the university has essentially been to conduct the baseline research and disseminate findings, to engage with the mayor's office, to write the network application and serve as liaison to the network, to engage with and serve as a resource to the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability staff, to find and collaborate with community partners, to take a pretty active role in the Portland Plan and prepare detailed comments, contribute to the comprehensive plan, now preparing our Portland action plan and developing indicators of progress, and really be persistent and collaborate and collaborate and collaborate. Here are some resources through our efforts here. The top photograph here is a summary of findings that we thank AARP Oregon for helping us print copies of. We recently published an article in Metroscape, which is a newsletter magazine published here at Portland State. It's called Planning for an Aging Society. Here's a picture of the Portland Plan and a link to it and the draft comprehensive plan. You can see where we're at with that now. So I thank you very much for your attention and look forward to questions at the end of our session today. And I turn you over to Dorian.
Hello, everyone. It is my honor to speak to all of you today. And I believe that my presentation will be very complementary to Margaret's presentation. Basically, New York City has been working since 2008 to implement the World Health Organization's Age-Friendly Cities initiative in the city here. And much of our work has overlap with Margaret's work, but some of it is different, and I think there's strengths in each of the models, and so I hope that you take away that message as you're hearing both of us today. So just to give you an overview, you saw the map that Margaret had earlier, which showed the original age-friendly cities and that were involved in the research process. This map, which is a little bit, you can't quite pinpoint individual cities, so we have them written out, shows which of the communities are involved at this moment in the network. And they really vary in size. So at this moment, it could be, there are networks across entire countries. For example, in Quebec, there's a whole network of communities that are involved, and in Portugal and in France. But then there are also individual large metropolises, there are counties and regions who are also involved in the Age-Friendly Cities network. There we go. I'm sorry, I had a problem advancing my slide. So in New York, the initiative is a joint partnership between the New York Academy of Medicine, which is where I work. We're a nonprofit organization that has been working in the city since 1847, together with the Office of the Mayor and the New York City Council. And that partnership is very important to us because it brings together two bodies of government and two branches of government, and also brings together the private sector. And we also have a commission that is led by private business people. And so our main focus of the initiative is that it should be seen as a governmental initiative, but also seen as something that belongs to the whole city, and that we all need to respond to the aging of the population. The project began by first consulting older people in New York, just like the work in Portland did. And we've spoken to more than 2,000 older people over several years. We continue to have these consultations now as each part of our program continues. We've talked to people in over 14 neighborhoods and 5 different languages and focused on 10 different immigrant groups in New York. About 43% of the older adult population in New York City was born in another country, so this is a very important component of our work. What we learned from people in these consultations is that they love New York City and they want to stay here, they want to continue living the lives that they've always lived, and that the strengths that they see in this city are many of the same strengths that people of all ages see, but they become even more important with age. Our large public transportation system, our wonderful health and social services, our cultural institutions, our density of resources, the fact that you can walk and pretty much find what you need in many of the city's neighborhoods. But then at the same time, the challenges that we heard from people were around affordability is a major problem in New York City, and also mobility, accessibility issues, also issues for people who don't speak English as their primary language, and also the changing social networks which are happening all around the world and around this country, that people no longer live in the same place where their whole family lives, and as people age, that becomes even more difficult because people's spouses, partners, friends pass away, move away, and how do people adjust to that shift? So after we put all the information together that we heard from people in the city, we put out a report around those findings. And then the city government in New York City said, okay, we're going to assess the age friendliness of every one of our departments. So here up on the screen you have some of the logos of the many agencies that make up New York City government. And what we asked people to do was, for example, the Parks Department, to, when they first looked at this, they said, okay, well, we're age friendly. We have parks and older people use our parks, and we even have some special programming for older people. And we said, okay, but think about information. What about when you have an event? Can someone find out that that's happening? Do they have to just passively look at the internet? What if they don't use the internet? Are you connected to community organizations to publicize things? Are you making sure that you're using different formats? Is there lighting? Is there seating? What about transportation to the park? If I can't get to the park, I can't use it. And so across every department, we had that sort of review. As a result, the city government put together 59 recommendations to expand new initiatives that had to do with age friendly. Now, some of those initiatives were things that the city was already working on, but certainly benefited older people. Some of them were aspirational, like to create more affordable housing, and there's some advances that are being made in that area. And then some were these really kind of midterm, medium-term, exciting new things, so which I'm going to tell you about today. We rolled these into the top 7 strategies for planning an age-friendly community, which we're hoping may help you as you're moving forward in your work. So our first strategy is plan for an aging population when making needed or required upgrades. So some of the things that we're doing in New York City around this area are looking at taxis. This is a very controversial thing in New York. The city recently had a taxi that was designed that as the other taxis get phased out, medallion holders are forced to buy these new taxis, and making sure that they are age-friendly, and we've been advocating in various ways to try to make that happen. Also to look at street furniture. When you're placing benches, when you're placing lighting, are you thinking about older people? When you have recreation centers that are public facilities, are you thinking about the exercise equipment that's needed, that's appropriate for older people? Are you considering universal design standards in all that you're building? Our second strategy, use or modify existing resources in creative new ways. So for example, we have these school buses in New York City, which is a resource that communities all around the country have, of course, and the drivers are being paid throughout the entire day, and the buses are there all day, and yet there's a period of time in the middle of the day when they're not being used by anyone. And so how do we potentially use those buses to help transport older people? Now, they're not an ideal form of transportation because they have steps to get up to them, and there's smaller seats, and the shock absorption is not fabulous. But at the same time, it's a wonderful resource. And so in New York, we have hundreds of trips every year where groups of older people that are connected through a special partnership with our Department of Education and our Department for the Aging, they're allowed to use the school buses. Similarly, in New York City, we have a paratransit system, as most communities have, and our paratransit system has many problems. It's called Access-a-Ride, having to do with delays, having to do with people having to wait outside on the street to be picked up. And so we had a special pilot in several neighborhoods where older adults who could use a taxi, so maybe it doesn't work for everyone if you needed, for example, personalized assistance and use a wheelchair, but you could be reimbursed for your taxi rides instead of taking Access-a-Ride, and this saves the government money because, in fact, it costs upwards more than $70 per person per trip for the government to use Access-a-Ride. Some other things that we did, these are some of the most notable improvements that you can probably see if you come visit New York City and walk around, or perhaps you are on this webinar and you are living in New York City. There are basically low-cost improvements to pedestrian safety. So we've extended pedestrian crossing times at hundreds of intersections and changed vehicle turning rules, painted new street lines. This has all been wrapped together into a program the city calls Safe Streets for Seniors, which is run by our Department of Transportation. And basically what this program does is it identified 25 neighborhoods throughout the city with the highest numbers of pedestrian injuries and fatalities, then went into those communities, had consultations with the people who live there, and chose key intersections to redesign. There have been more than 100 intersections that have been redesigned through this process. A lot of the funding for this comes through New Freedom dollars, which Jana, who is our next presenter, can talk a little bit about, and are available to communities throughout the country. So an example of one of those street redesigns, if you look at the bottom of this slide over here, this is the old intersection in Chinatown in the Bowery area. And as you see, it's a very, very long crossing, and it's many different competing needs all at once. And under the Safe Streets for Seniors program, a new pedestrian island was built in the middle to give people a resting place. Also, if you look, parking was removed, and there's a new bike lane added over here. And there were many other changes also to the lighting and to curbs being bumped out. Now this is happening throughout the city. This is a higher cost change because of the pedestrian island being built in, but in many of the other intersections that we've been working with, it often is just moving a stop line further back, changing the timing of the intersection. In this case, it reduced pedestrian injuries by 50%. And if anyone's interested in learning more about this program, you can go to our Department of Transportation, to their Safe Streets for Seniors website, and see many of the results they've had in different neighborhoods. In the first 5 neighborhoods where this was implemented, pedestrian injuries were reduced by between 9 and 60%. This was in the next year. And non-pedestrian crashes were reduced by 23 to 46%. We've had even more exciting results. We had an intersection that was completed over a year ago that had a 90% decrease in pedestrian injuries. And so we're very excited and proud of this program. Our third strategy that we want to offer you is to ensure that older adults know about existing opportunities and resources. So what we found in New York City is that we're actually incredibly rich in terms of the resources that we have, and we believe that all communities are this way, that you have educational institutions and businesses and all kinds of services, and the main problem is making sure that people know that these exist, and this is especially important for older people. So we reached out to all of the cultural institutions in New York City, which is several hundred, more than 300, and we put together these cultural guides for seniors. And basically they list accessibility options, affordability options, you know, when can you go for free or discounted tickets, and also special programming for older people. And these guides are available online. They're also available in print in certain locations. And they were an intervention in themselves, because by having to fill this out, cultural institutions who were not thinking about seniors began to think about them. We also surveyed New York City's colleges and universities to find out what they offer for older people. So this is not just courses, which are incredibly important, but can I walk onto your campus? without a security card? Can I use your gym or your library or your computer lab? If I'm looking for some job training, can I find that? And that's all been put together into a database which you can access at agefriendlycollege.org, which we have been training older people around the city to use. Our fourth strategy, engaging different professional networks and thinking about what they can do to help. So some examples of ways that we've done this, the American Institute for Architects in New York City, they have a New York chapter, and they have started a Design for Aging committee where the architects come together monthly to hear different speakers and to meet to discuss this issue. They just held a big event this past weekend, charrette, called Booming Boroughs, where they had 5 different groups of experts across different disciplines work together to design solutions for housing and different kinds of housing models in New York. So looking at single-family homes, at walk-up buildings, high-rise buildings, and then to present those findings and those creative solutions back to an audience and judging panel that came that day. You can go to boomingboroughs.com to read more about that. We worked with librarians across the city. What we discovered was that branches of libraries each had their own special best practices and things that they were doing to better include older people, but that they were not communicating with each other about those things. So we've held several events to help them do that, and also they've created a best practices guide for librarians in New York City. We worked with attorneys across New York State, actually, around an event that was not just focused on elder law, which is a very specific profession, but the idea that lawyers should be looking at all parts of law, whether it's housing, whether it's business law, whether it's I want to be an entrepreneur and I'm an older person, and thinking about how they need to customize their services for older people. We try to present this as an opportunity because it is an opportunity for these professions to make money, to become better at what they do, and not as just something that they should do to be socially responsible. Our fifth strategy is to help businesses better serve and attract older adults, and this ties into what I was just saying. What we heard from older people is that their main contacts in the community are often the local businesses that they frequent, and that those businesses are incredibly important to their lives, and that older adults are often an untapped consumer base. We have found that even people who do not have very much money, they tend to spend their money locally and are very loyal customers, and we try to communicate that to businesses throughout the city. So we have guides that we first went door to door with teams of people to 1,000 businesses around the city and got people to sign on to be age-friendly businesses. But then since then we've actually worked with more than 30 merchants associations and chambers of commerce in New York City to help have training sessions and help spread these materials to build awareness around these issues. We have a guide for making your business more sound-friendly for older adults, to looking at your signage and print materials. And then just to give you some quick examples from specific businesses that you see here pictured, the Apple Store, for example, on the Upper West Side in Manhattan. They can appear very un-age-friendly. They have a line that goes out the door. There's not great seating. It can be very intimidating to navigate. And they've started to open in the morning before the store opens to have specific, very basic computer classes that mostly attract older people. And they offer coffee and some more comfortable chairs. And Brooklyn Swirl, this middle photo, is of a frozen yogurt shop in Brooklyn where they offer special deals for grandparents and grandchildren who come in together. And Fairway, this is a very popular supermarket in New York City. They have personal shoppers for people who, when you come in at no cost, you can have someone take you around the store and reach things high and low on shelves and help you find what you need. Our sixth strategy is to use private sponsorship for the benefit of your community. So one great example of that in New York is we have these fabulous new bus shelters, which is the photo of one here where you can actually see out if a bus is coming because you have this clear glass panel, and also you have some shelter from the weather elements and a bench and much more clear signage, and the advertisements on the bus shelter pay for that. Similarly, we had a local neighborhood insurance company pay for chairs to give out to local businesses, and we have new benches that are having the same thing in New York City. Our seventh strategy is to mobilize local communities to get additional and new kinds of resources involved in making neighborhoods better for older adults. So some of our local examples, what does that mean? We have these new things called aging improvement districts, and basically it's taking our age-friendly process that we did at a city level and bringing it to a neighborhood. So asking older people in a neighborhood, conducting community consultations, what are the strengths of your neighborhood, what are the challenges of your neighborhood, and then bringing together an advisory group across sectors to think, how do we address some of these issues? We also work locally with specific cultural institutions on how they can become more age-friendly, and I'm going to speak in a moment about some fabulous things we've been doing around swimming pools, an example that came out of our aging improvement districts. We also have created these grocery guides at a neighborhood level where we have gone out and talked to the grocery stores about what they offer for older adults, and again, it's an intervention in itself, asking the stores about what they're doing. So this is one of my most favorite components of age-friendly New York City, is that when we went out and talked to older adults in East Harlem, they said to us, we would not go swimming in a swimming pool that looked like this. I haven't been swimming in decades because there's no way I'm going in that public pool when there's kids doing cannonballs over my head and I'm going to slip on the floor and all kinds of other obstacles and issues. But you know what? Maybe if there was a special time for older people, I would go to that pool. And so we shared that information at a big event where there were older people present and where we also had the Parks Commissioner there amongst other city leaders. And the Parks Commissioner felt pressured and stood up and said, next summer we're going to have senior-only swim hours in the morning before the pool opens for older people. And so that happened in East Harlem in one community. And then it was so successful that first summer that it's now been replicated in 14 communities. And now we also have wellness instructors that are leading activities at the pools in each of those places. And we have it's just amazing. Older people who said they just feel like entirely different people and they've never, it's a social experience, it's an experience to improve their health. It's one of the most exciting days for me is when I get to go back to the pool every summer and see this happen. So last summer we had pre- and post-fitness tests, and we found out that 80% of older adults who participated across the summer showed improvement in various physical fitness tests, and we have those results if that's helpful to anyone who's looking to implement a similar program. Some of the guiding principles behind our work is that an aging population is an opportunity, not a crisis. That older adults are experts on their own lives and needs, and that all sectors of the city or community that you're working in must be engaged in order to create an age-friendly community. An age-in-everything approach is key to planning, and that both top-down and bottom-up strategies are needed, meaning solutions need to come both from policymakers and from those who are affected by the policies. And that we need to use win-win solutions. We need to think about what will benefit government, what will save them money, what will benefit business in order to make sure that they're going to want to be partners in this. Many of the challenges and many of the changes needed, are low or no cost, and that pace matters, that people need to see results in order to believe in the process moving forward. At the New York Academy of Medicine, we provide technical assistance to communities and cities around the world who are interested in taking on these initiatives. And so if you are interested in that or interested in learning more about our work, please feel free to contact me. My email address is here on this slide. You can also follow us on Twitter at AgeFriendlyNYC or view any of our tools and resources on our website. Thank you.
Oh, I was muted, so sorry about that. My name is Jana, Lynott, and I'm with AARP's Public Policy Institute. And I'm going to switch gears slightly here. First, I want to give an applause out to both Dori and Margaret, both Portland and New York City are among the first U.S. communities involved in the WHO Age-Friendly Cities Network, and thus they have a lot of experience in looking for solutions to make our communities more age-friendly, and they have a lot of great examples of how we can do that. So that was wonderful. So anyway, I want to let's see. Okay. I'm going to focus my presentation in at least the first part of it on talking about transportation services. And Margaret earlier presented this flower example from the WHO and others that have looked at the various domains or elements that comprise an age-friendly community. Now, transportation, as Margaret mentioned, is really part of the built environment, but it's also part of the service environment, and it's an enabler. It helps people engage in the social and civic environment of the community. So one of the questions I get from planners and from others at the local level is, what are good transportation solutions for older adults, and how can we fund those solutions in our communities? So I'm going to build upon a recent publication that I've done entitled Weaving It Together, a tapestry of transportation funding for older adults, and provide some examples of how that is done. And toward the end of my presentation, I'm going to just give a quick synopsis of AARP's involvement in the WHO Age-Friendly Communities effort. So first off, what is specialized transportation, which is the focus of my presentation today? Well, specialized transportation is transportation that's provided either through volunteer drivers, through discounted taxi programs, transportation provided in vans or small buses. But the focus is for those who have difficulty using the fixed route public transportation system, either because of disability, age-related conditions, or income constraints. Certainly, the transportation element or domain as part of the Age-Friendly Communities program is much larger than specialized transportation. It includes the fixed route system. It includes things like complete streets that look at the design of the environment. But for the purposes of my presentation today, I want to focus just on the service side of transportation. So why specialized transportation? Well, first, 21% of older adults do not drive. That's 8 million persons age 65 and older in our country. And of the trips that these older adults take on public transportation, 60% of their public transportation trips are on specialized transportation. In terms of the numbers of older non-drivers, even though women's licensing rates have increased over the past decades, and we're now seeing men's licensing rates slightly on the decline, just because of the sheer size of the female cohort of this population, older women outnumber older men as non-drivers 3-to-1. So it is a service that is certainly important to both genders, but in particular a service that many older women are taking advantage of. Now, another thing to be aware of in communities is that disability rates, at least between 1984 and 2004, have been on the decline. At the same time, rates of institutional use have been on the decline, meaning that fewer older adults are moving into nursing homes as they age. They're staying put in their homes and communities, which increases the demands for transportation service and other types of services that are provided by local government and others. So again, I'm going to walk through specialized transportation, how it's funded, and then provide some case studies. I'm pulling from my most recent publication, Weaving It Together, a tapestry of transportation funding for older adults. And if you go to the full publication, what you'll find is a very detailed summary of the federal funding programs for specialized transportation, as well as very detailed case studies of 7 providers from throughout the United States, as well as detail about their funding sources from the federal, state, and local levels. So just to give folks a good sense of what specialized transportation services looks like, let me start with the types of institutional structures for specialized transportation providers. The first category are traditional public transportation providers, and the 3 that we selected for our paper include 3 rural public transportation providers: River Cities Public Transit from South Dakota, People Rides from Iowa, and Pelivan Transit from Oklahoma. All of these providers are providing general purpose, demand response, rural public transportation service, meaning that anyone in the community can call up for an advance reservation to get a trip from their home to a destination within the service area. But in addition to this general purpose public transportation service they're providing, they're also reaching out into the community to piece together other ways to serve that community through primarily service contracts. So for instance, River Cities offers medical routes that takes folks from the center of the state in Pierre to Sioux Falls and Rapid City on the edges of the state. It's outside their service area, but they feel that the rural population needs to access the medical facilities in the larger cities, and they're providing that public transportation to get there. River Cities and Pelivan are both providing deviated fixed employment route type of service, meaning they have a route set up in a rural area, but folks can call so that a bus deviates off that route and picks them up closer to home. And that is largely funded, at least in the past, through the FTA Job Access Reverse Commute program to try to help link lower income employees to jobs elsewhere in the county. Also, River Cities and Pelivan have reached out to the Indian nations in their states, and they are under contract to provide tribal transit service in the state. And all 3 of these rural public transportation providers are also acting as Medicaid non-emergency medical transportation providers. So a second type of institutional structure of specialized transportation providers is that is really managed out of a human service agency or nonprofit organization that specializes in serving older adults and persons with disabilities in the community. So the one case study we looked at that falls into this model is the Seniors Resource Center of Colorado, the Denver area. It, as a rural public transportation provider, it provides demand response door-through-door transportation. The door-through-door is a little different in that there's actually a driver who will stop the vehicle and help a person from the vehicle into their home, or at least to the door, which provides an elevated level of service for folks who need that. They also have a volunteer driver program. They are under contract with one of the local jurisdictions in their service area to run the complimentary ADA paratransit service that is required under the Americans for Disabilities Act for fixed route systems. And they also offer mobility management, which is really personalized service to help link an older adult or person with disability in the community to understand what the various options of transportation are that exist and help them identify which is the best option to meet their needs. And finally, the other category of institutional structure is kind of other. Each of these 3 takes a different form. There's DARTS in rural Mississippi, which functions very much as a traditional rural public transit provider, but they're housed out of a community health center. Community health centers provide medical care to the lowest income individuals in the community who are uninsured and vulnerable. And the reason DARTS was initiated out of this community health center is because they found they were not able to get their clients weren't able to get to health services. And so they went to their state DOT and asked about grants and were able to secure a federal transit grant for rural public transportation service. So not only are they serving their own clients, but they're also performing as the general public transportation provider in the region. Now, Medical Motor Service is a nonprofit organization, and it is providing demand response public transit service. It also has contracts with senior and adult day centers to provide transportation to and from centers for their clientele. It has negotiated a contract with the local Wegmans, which is a supermarket, where they're providing shuttle service from senior housing to the grocery store on 1 day a week. They also offer mobility management and are a very large Medicaid non-emergency medical transportation provider. And then finally, Marin Access Mobility Management Center is housed in the Marin Transit, the local fixed route transit provider, and its focus is on meeting the needs of older adults, persons with disabilities. They provide mobility management service, travel training, teaching folks how to use the fixed route public transportation system. They also offer under contract ADA paratransit service for a neighboring jurisdiction, as well as a taxi discount program and a volunteer driver program. So what we learned from interviewing each of these providers is that what we see for those who are growing their service and really expanding the service and the number of people they're able to serve in the community, that it depends on a real tapestry of funding sources, diversity of institutional types, and it requires lots of innovation and energy from the providers themselves to reach out into the community and form partnerships. Now, I will say that I need to differentiate between your typical, perhaps traditional, specialized transportation provider and its funding sources and those 7 that we interviewed, which I would say are exemplar systems here in the United States. I think your traditional provider follows the model of receiving a federal grant in combination with some local general funds in order to meet the federal match requirements. But for those systems that are following this mode, I would say they're not able to grow their services because for the most part federal funding has remained stagnant. There was some increase in federal funding under MAP 21, the Surface Transportation Law, but by and large it's public sector funding for specialized transportation services is fairly stagnant. So it does require reaching out into the community and looking for other sources of funding. Now, just talking a little bit about the key federal funding sources, of course there's the Federal Transit Administration. The Section 5310 program is Enhanced Mobility of Seniors and Individuals with Disabilities program. Under MAP 21, it was merged with the New Freedom program. It still remains under the title of 5310. There's also FTA's fairly new Veterans Transportation Community Living Initiative, and that program is pulling funding from other FTA grant programs into this program in order to provide financing for technology improvements for public transportation systems that will help them coordinate their services across a region or across the state. So River Cities Transit in South Dakota and Pelivan Transit in Oklahoma are both recipients of this grant funding. Outside of FTA, under the Health and Human Services Department, there's the Administration for Community Living, the Administration on Aging, which administers the Title 3B funding from the Older Americans Act. And there's lots of flexibility for states in how they want to use that money for senior services. States have chosen, at least in 2010, to spend about $72 million nationally on senior transportation. And that funding is largely directed toward frail older adults, those in most need of transportation services. So it's very common for an area agency on aging to get Section 5310 money from FTA to fund their capital, their buses, in combination with Title IIIB funding to actually operate the service. And then finally, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Service provides an enormous amount of money for specialized transportation, in particular medical transportation, through the Medicaid Non-Emergency Medical Transportation Program. And that provides funding only for Medicaid beneficiaries who are seeking to get to medical type of appointments. So it's not general purpose transportation whatsoever. And then finally, CMS also has the 1915C Home and Community-Based Services waivers, where states can choose to use this funding for transportation services which enable older adults to remain in their homes and communities as opposed to moving into institutional settings. So what we found in looking at the revenue sources from these 7 providers is that each provider had at least 10 funding sources, 3 showed 45 funding sources, and 1, People Rides of Iowa, 57 funding sources, primarily through service contracts. So the local funding share, it doesn't just comprise local government share, it also includes the private sector contributions toward the public transportation service. So what do some of those contributions look like? Well, for example, Pelivan has reached out to their local Jiffy Lube. Jiffy Lube is changing the oil in the Pelivan vehicles at a discounted rate. And Pelivan is counting that discount as local match for Federal Transit Administration grants. FTA provides a lot of flexibility in how you meet that local match, and that's one of the ways. Now, sort of the opposite situation, DARTS in Mississippi has used an ARA grant, the American Reinvestment and Recovery and Reinvestment Act grant, to expand its maintenance facility so that it can do maintenance on commercial vehicles and raise some additional revenue in the process of doing that. So kind of functioning as a private sector entity in and of itself. So lots of creativity, but it's also very common for these private providers to reach out and form partnerships or sign service contracts to run transportation service for various government agencies or nonprofit organizations as well. So just a little bit on state funding sources. In total, for the 7 providers we interviewed, state funding was very low at 7% across the board, with some states, Iowa, being higher at, I think, close to 25% of its total revenue sources. There are 2 states that I want to draw attention to as offering a model for sort of a state commitment towards sustainable funding for public transportation service. First, Oklahoma has a state revolving fund that's financed through the motor fuel tax and general fund, and then through that they're able to distribute transit grants, and it's based in part on previous year's mileage, which really incentivizes transit providers to go out and seek these service contracts and provide more rides, etc. Now, Iowa devotes 1/20 of the first 4 cents of the state sales tax collected on the sale of motor vehicles and motor vehicle accessories to support public transportation, and also distributes those grants based on performance. And Iowa is actually only one of 6 states with public transportation service in every county, and they're in part able to do this through an institutionalized sustainable funding source. Now, just to draw quick attention to 2 providers, Marin Access Mobility Management Center, back in 2010, voters in the county approved raising their local vehicle registration fees by $10 through a referendum. which isn't too uncommon to have a referendum to raise money for transportation, and becoming increasingly common even to raise money for public transportation. But it's the only county I'm aware of where a portion of that revenue, 35%, is dedicated to senior transportation and transportation for persons with disabilities by directing it to Marin Access Mobility Management Center. And then River City's public transportation. It has grown its ridership by a factor of 25 in the past 10 years. Back in 2001, it was providing only about 12,000 rides. Today, it provides more than 300,000 rides to people from its service area. And within its peer service area, which is just around the capital city and the area surrounding the capital city, a very small area, it's able to provide 24-hour-a-day, 365-day-a-year service, which is almost unheard of for a rural public transportation provider. Now, it has been able to grow its services not from having incredible local or state support, but really by reaching out to the surrounding counties to offer its services and bring them in under service contracts to provide the service that it offers. And it has a number of other innovations as well. So just to start wrapping up, some tips for planners. I realize that many of you are not public transportation providers directly, but I do think understanding specialized transportation and understanding the need and relating it to the planning work that you're doing is very important. So making sure that it's integrated into your comprehensive plan or other transportation and transit plan elements. Reaching out to human service professionals, again, to understand the need and opportunities for coordination and partnerships. Now I'd like to turn my attention to talking just very briefly about AARP's role in the Age-Friendly Communities Network. Last year, we became the U.S. affiliate for WHO's Age-Friendly Communities program. And as part of that, we're helping WHO identify appropriate communities and facilitate their application to join the network. There's a lot of benefits for joining this network. You basically get to be part of a global network of participating communities. For states where AARP is involved, you have access to our state office staff who are excellent at helping to convene various stakeholder groups in the community and really start a good quality discussion. So these are the state offices that are currently involved in promoting this network. We have 9 state offices, including the District of Columbia. So, and really if you're interested in joining, I would recommend that you begin by reaching out to the AARP state office in your state and see if they are interested in helping to facilitate the application process. Now, even though we only have 9 state offices officially involved at this point in time, we have about 36 state offices who are working on some aspect of livable communities. And those would all be likely states to want to get involved in the Age-Friendly Communities program. Now, even if the AARP state office is not resourced to help the application along, you can always reach out directly to WHO to move things forward. So there's no fee to join. Really what we're looking for is a letter of commitment from the highest level of government saying we want to be part of this network and we want to commit to becoming more age-friendly. And with that commitment and certification, then a community moves over the course of the next 2 years to establish a Citizens Advisory Committee comprised in part of older adults in the community, and to establish a robust and concrete plan of action that responds to the needs of older adults. So I guess with that, I will turn the mic back over to Ramona, who will help us facilitate the question and answer period.
Hi, Jana. Actually, this is Brittany again, and I will go ahead and read through some of the questions we've been receiving. So as you can see, the contact information for all of our speakers today is available right now up on the screen. So go ahead and feel free to jot it down, and I'm sure they will be happy to answer any emails you send them. Our first question comes in from Laura, and she's asking, what is the age that one is considered old or an older person?
So why don't I let me give that a first shot. I think it's really defined by the individual, and we know that none of us think we're old. We have a great anecdote at AARP where we did focus groups in rural Alabama, and the focus group facilitator asked the group had they thought about what they would do if they had to hang up the car keys. And this 92-year-old woman said, well, when I get old, I think I'll rely on the neighbor girls down the street to give me a ride. But it was that concept that even at 92, we don't necessarily consider ourselves old. For the purpose of a lot of the research that I do, just in part driven by the data sets that are available, I typically look at 65 and older. AARP really promotes membership for all people 50 and older, but we don't think that 50 and older is necessarily old. So it's really all over the map. And the final comment, I would say that just as Margaret pointed out early in her presentation, age-friendly communities, it's not so much about being elder-friendly, but being friendly to persons of all ages. We're trying to make communities that work for everyone.
All right, great, thank you. Our next question comes in from Ben. Portland and New York City provide great examples of what large cities with extensive resources can do. What recommendations do you have for smaller communities or sparsely populated rural areas? Also, what is the role of volunteer organizations relative to what municipal government does to provide services for seniors and to make the built environment more accessible?
I would love to take this one. This is Dory Block in New York. You know, I think that while the solutions may be very different, the process can still be the same in all different communities, and we've advised you know, many different communities and regions. I was just out in Kansas City, Missouri, and advising their regional council on their age-friendly initiative. And the process of talking to the people in your community, both older adults and considering them to be experts on their own lives and needs, and then the experts that do exist in your community, and then taking that information and bringing it to the people who can create change to try to create some of that change is the same process that would happen anywhere. And so I think my first advice would be to first ask people what they need and what is working for them, and then to try to bring the existing resources together to address some of those issues. I don't know if any of the other presenters have thoughts on that.
I just have a resource I'd like to share with people who are interested in rural and remote communities. There was a symposium held at the University of Manitoba this past fall, and the proceedings are out, and it's called Making Rural and Remote Communities and Places More Age-Friendly, Why and How. And if you just type www.agefriendlymanitoba.ca, you'll get to where you need to be.
And I would just add the paper that I talked about today, Weaving It Together, it's primarily focused on rural solutions, at least for transportation sector.
All right, great. Our next question comes in from Armando. How can airport waiting lines at security checkpoints and at passport control booths be made more age-friendly? Are any of these cities' airport authorities looking into this?
This is Jana. Let me try to.
I love that question.
It's an excellent question, and is it the Federal Aviation Administration that manages airport accessibility? Whichever federal agency is responsible has recently instituted new guidelines for the security lines for persons 75 and older, that they no longer have to remove their shoes or remove their jacket, which somewhat helps make things more accessible. There's also an agency within that department that accepts basically complaints from the community where airports are not physically designed for accessibility, and then they will investigate those types of things. And I can look for that information here and see if I can't get that out to people.
Okay, next question.
I would just add that I think that's a really great.
Sorry, Margaret.
I was just going to say that I think it is a really great question. I've done a fair bit of international travel recently, and domestic too. And I think it's a huge problem. And Jana, if you find the name of the complaint office, we should probably all write to them.
I will say it's an office of 2 or 3 is all, so it's not very well resourced.
Right. So far, we haven't addressed the issue in Portland, and Portland is supposedly considered one of the best airports in the U.S., but it remains far from being age-friendly or disability-friendly in terms of lines and places to sit and all of that. So huge arena for improvement there.
The same thing in New York. It's a major issue, and we haven't done anything to really address it. So I think this is a reminder to move it up in our list of things to address.
Okay, our next question comes in from Scott. Margaret, could you repeat what you said was the failure in Portland's effort? And then could the panel talk a little bit about their view of complete streets and whether and in what ways the complete street approach has been found lacking with regard to this part of our population?
No, I don't think our effort was a failure. I think that what we have done has been slow, and that's because we've been really working toward making policy changes and getting those codified into our Portland plan, into the comprehensive plan, and it's a much slower process than you might think. In the long run, I'm convinced it will pay off and will be well worth the effort, but it's just been a little slower than maybe I would have expected or hoped for. In terms of complete streets, the comprehensive plan initially started, and Portland plan initially started talking about a 20-minute neighborhood, and that concept was rejected by aging and disability advocates because it placed this time frame on getting around, getting from getting from your home to the services that you need. And so now the movement has been toward this concept of a neighborhood hub without time limitations on how to get there. Obviously, it takes longer if you walk. If you roll, you can get there pretty quickly sometimes. Public transportation obviously takes longer than driving, so that concept didn't work.
I would say, this is Jana, that AARP is a strong promoter of complete streets policy adoption and implementation. We have a number of state offices who have pushed this and have successfully gotten legislation passed at the state level as well as local complete streets policy. And it works as well for older adults as explicit thought is put into the needs of older adults in the Complete Streets Network. I think Dory gave examples of New York City's Safe Routes to Seniors program, and by and large the improvements that are being made with seniors in mind benefit all other classifications of people in the community. It's reducing pedestrian injuries for people of all ages, so there's a lot of synergy between what we design for older adults and beneficial to the larger community. But we do think there is a need in adopting those policies and in implementation to really think through the particular needs of older adults. For example, sidewalk design and materials choice. As we age, our eyesight tends to diminish and we tend to have reduced balance. And if sidewalks have been bricked and they're not well maintained and it's not a perfectly smooth surface, it can increase the risk of falls, which is a huge concern for older adults and something that is actually they have the right to be concerned that hospitalizations from falls is like the #1 reason that older adults go into the hospital for non-otherwise medical reasons. So it does require thinking through the specific design treatments, materials, as well as making sure there are benches, places to rest for older adults in the community.
In New York, we partnered with AARP to support Complete Streets legislation, and one of the limitations, of course, is that in our legislation is that it's only for new construction and new projects. So, of course, the other limitation is that people are not mandated to create complete streets in streets where there's no new project going on. And, you know, if you live in a place where it's more historic and there aren't as many new projects, then you're not reaping the benefits. And so we have to work on other ways to address those streets issues.
All right, great. I think we have time to take just one last quick question. This one goes out to Ms. Block. How are you involved in city environmental quality review on individual projects?
We are not involved in reviews on individual projects at this point. It would be something that we would love to have, and we've also been working on health impact statements on all projects in New York City, but that has yet to take hold. What we are doing in New York is working to have age-friendly concepts built into our mayor's management report, which is basically a report that every department has to put in on the progress of its work, and we're hoping that to create an age-friendly layer to that, to the twice-yearly reports that have to come out from the city, and that's our the best that we've done in terms of integrating any kind of review into ongoing work, but otherwise we haven't gotten to that place yet.
Okay. Well, thank you all so much for giving a great presentation. Thank you, Ramona, for organizing this presentation, the Private Practice Division. I'm going to go through just a few reminders on how to log your CM credits for attending today's event. So I'm going to go ahead and switch it back over to my screen. So if you missed this in the beginning, I'll just go back over how to log your CM credits. And with this, we'll end our webcast. Thanks, everyone. Okay, and to log your CM credits for today's event, go to www.planning.org/CM and select today's date, which is Friday, May 24th. And then select today's webcast, which is Age-Friendly Communities. The event code is also listed on the screen. That's 23306. This webcast is available for 1.5 CM credits. Also, we are recording today's event, so it will be available. And you can find this webcast on our YouTube channel, which is Planning Webcast. And with this concludes our session for today. And I want to thank everyone again for attending.